Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 155 of I Wish You Were Dead, a podcast about things that used to be alive. My name is Mike, that is Gavin and Thea. And friends, have you ever gotten absolutely hammered on a Monday?
Oh no.
I mean, probably.
Yeah, probably at some point in my life. But did you recently?
How about at some point in the future from when we're recording this?
Oh.
I mean,
Gavin?
probably at some point. If you're referring to today, the day we're recording this,
That's
that's
exactly
not
what
what's
I'm referring
happening.
to, Gavin. Because
So,
Gavin is going to some big fancy St. Patrick's Day party.
I'm not.
Oh no.
No, I am going, but that's not what it is.
Oh.
We're recording this on St. Patrick's Day. And it's at some, one of, the nicer bars. So basically, I live in a college town, so not the student bar, basically. Some kind of is St. Patrick's Day singing thing, so I assume it's some kind of karaoke. Liz really wanted to go, so I am going.
Hooray.
I
But
am going to make a bet and say that there will be some drinking going on.
I mean, I'll probably have a drink,
Mm-hmm.
maybe two.
At least one shot.
But it's
There it
also
is.
Monday. So
That's what I'm saying. So that's hence the opening question. Gavin, you gonna get hammered?
no,
Not on purpose.
I'm no. We're on a budget.
Fair.
Okay, so
The reason this isn't one of the student bars is because it's expensive. So
No.
no. Probably at some point in the future, but it will not be tonight.
All right. Well, if you want to listen to the end of this episode when Gavin gives you a an update on how the night went, you can go ahead and skip ahead to the last minute or so of the episode. Gavin will tell everybody exactly how many drinks that he had.
I mean, sure. I guess I'll do that. Why not?
I appreciate you volunteering that information for everybody, Gavin. That was a
It will not be more than 2 or 3. I promise.
All right.
Anywho,
yeah.
yeah. So today it's an episode that ends in 5, which means that it's not mine. I didn't have to do work this time. This means it's a Fia episode.
Hooray.
Yay!
Hell yeah.
Fia Takes the Wheel, Volume 6. And Fia, just as a quick interlude, that's not the right word, introduction. What are we talking about today after our announcements and housekeeping and such?
Yes, today we're going to be talking about the secret superhero of the sea. Say that 5 times. It's really hard. Seagrass. I realized after I switched to Seagrass Corner that I've kind of danced around talking about seagrass, but I haven't really talked a good long while about it. So today we're going to talk about seagrass, why it's important, why it's under risk, and sprinkle in some fun personal anecdotes from my research.
Love that.
Yeah.
I'm in. Let's do it.
Yeah. But first, as always, a little bit of housekeeping.
Mm-hmm.
And since it is a Fia episode, I will be keeping house. First, do not forget to rate the show on whatever platform you listen to us on, and make sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube to give us feedback about the show and suggest any future topics you'd like to hear on the show. If you'd like to be a guest, make sure to fill out our guest form down in the show notes. And as for next episode, we are doubling down on plants. We're going to be talking about flowers next week. What exactly is a flower? What kinds of plants make flowers? It is going to be more complicated than you think.
Gavin,
So,
this is
I
very
know.
shocking.
I know.
Mhm.
I'm taking a risk here.
Okay, well, I am looking forward
Speaking
to
of
that.
taking risks, going to a St. Patrick's Day event on a Monday and saying not going to get hammered.
Yeah.
Full of risks today.
Oh, Mike. Speaking of potentially risks, Mike, what happened today in history?
So, what we're talking about today in history.
Sure.
One thing that I don't think that we talk about enough. So YouTube. I think it's fair to say both of you two, like, you know your sports, like, you're familiar with the idea of sports, but you're not the biggest sports fans.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
name some famous athletes between the two of you.
LeBron James.
Okay, LeBron James.
Michael Jordan.
So Michael Jordan. Let's talk about Michael Jordan here. It
Okay.
took you two names to get to Michael Jordan. Okay,
Right.
one of the most famous athletes ever, like a part of Americana in
Yeah.
a way that we don't have anymore. At the height of his powers, Michael Jordan had won 3 straight NBA championships. He was the best
Correct.
basketball player in the world.
Yep.
He is the icon of everything. Do you know what Michael Jordan did
What?
right in the middle of this?
He went and played baseball.
Yes!
Oh.
Michael Jordan, and he didn't just go, like, he wasn't like, going to play for the New York Yankees or anything. He went to Double A.
Yeah.
He went to, I think it was like the Binghamton Barons or something. He was,
I
or
think that's right.
not Binghamton, like Birmingham or something. Whatever it was. He was like Double A, whatever. It was like the best basketball player in the world in the prime of his career, just up and quits and goes to play in Double A.
Why?
Does that for a year, and then on March 19th, 1995, Michael Jordan rejoins the Chicago Bulls 17 months after a career in baseball. And
I
he
mean,
immediately...
we've all seen Space Jam.
Yeah.
Fia, have you?
I have.
Yes! It's been a while since I've seen Space Jam.
You know, the good one.
Yeah. Although it is kind of wild when you go back and watch that movie, just how much it is just like a commercial for Michael Jordan, rather than his movie.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, so on Today in History, Michael Jordan rejoins the Chicago Bulls and drops 19 points while the Bulls lost to the Pacers.
Nice.
Neat.
Yeah. All right, Thea. Oh, wait. Gavin, you
yep,
don't have
no,
anything to do today, do you?
I have a quick, we've just been keeping up with various things the administration's been doing.
Don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so once again, as always, if you don't want to be sad, there is a timestamp in the show notes below. Obviously, there are many things that have happened since our last episode. 2 weeks in the year of our Lord 2025 feels like a decade.
Yep.
So in those 2 weeks, various things, including tariffs, that'll make the cost of scientific equipment more expensive. The government almost shutting down, which would shut down a lot of funding for different grants that already haven't been shut down. Measles is spreading across the country, with at least one death confirmed and another probable death. Continued cuts to various global health efforts to fight diseases around the world. Actually, by the time you're listening to this, dear listener, the book that I mentioned last episode, Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green, will be out. So I pre-ordered a copy. It will be here, sometime tomorrow, Tuesday, on the day it comes out. I'm very excited looking forward to reading it.
Yeah.
Anywho, today, what we're actually talking about, though, I'm going to talk briefly about something that just happened, like, over this past weekend, over the past couple of days. The Department of Homeland Security has attempted to deport a recent grad student out of Columbia University in New York City named Mahmoud Khalil. He is a green card holder, married to a U.S. citizen who is 8 months pregnant.
Oh.
This guy was originally born in Syria, but his family is originally from Palestine. He came to the U.S. for education and earned his master's at Columbia. And so toward the end of last school year, if you remember, there were many protests on college campuses all over the country about the war going on in Gaza and Israel's behavior during the war. We're not going to litigate anything else about this, about, like, the war. That's not what we're here to talk about. But sort of the goal of these protests was basically to get colleges, many of whom are heavily invested in various parts of Israeli companies or own stock in bonds in the Israeli government that provide funds to the Israeli government. The goal of these protesters was to get these colleges and universities to divest from those things to basically to make it harder for Israel to continue the war. Basically, every college campus, especially the larger ones, but even smaller ones like Bucknell had some protests, very light, but some. And so while these protests were by and large peaceful, there were certain campuses that did become violent, and protesters, fought with police. There were also some really, and like not sugarcoating us at all, some really awful displays of anti-Semitism, which obviously is bad.
Yeah.
We are very anti-Semitism here. And so one of the campuses that received the most publicity for these protests was Columbia, which Columbia itself has a very long history of students protesting wars, especially the Vietnam War. That's something that Columbia supposedly takes great pride in when it's not a current war being protested. But students at various points at Columbia set up encampments with tents and stuff and basically lived in the open-air quads on campus in protest, in addition to occupying a few buildings. Obviously, this was disruptive to students, faculty, and staff who weren't part of these protests, which I guess at the end of the day is kind of the point of a protest, is to be disruptive, but anyway. Not here to litigate how to protest quote-unquote correctly. Not what we're talking about. A lot of people around academia think that some people in these, protests went too far. But one person who did not go too far was Mahmoud Khalil. He was basically a representative who spoke to the administration of Columbia, president, chancellor, etc., the people in charge of Columbia University. He was sort of like the representative who spoke to them on behalf of the protesters. So, according to CNN and the New York Times, he did not, participate in the encampments or occupy any buildings or anything. But however, over, the past, week or so, he was detained and flown from New York to Louisiana, despite still not having been charged with a crime. And at the time of his arrest, his wife, asked what he was being detained for, why he was being arrested. And the plainclothes officers basically just refused to answer. And still, at this point, he has not been charged with anything. But he has been flown to Louisiana and is being held in a detention center down there. And while he was there, he was not able to speak to his lawyer for 5 days. Something that's really important to note here is that he is a green card holder. He's a lawful permanent resident. So he's allowed to live here and work here permanently.
Yeah.
That's what a green card is. It's like the next best thing to being a citizen. And the people who arrested him initially were wrong and said that his student visa was revoked. But he was not here on a student visa. He's here on a green card. And they arrested him anyway and sent him to a state with judges who will be friendlier to the Trump administration. And this is not an isolated story. Many people have been being rounded up and sent to Louisiana specifically for this reason. And so when asked about it by the press and Mr. Khalil's lawyers, the administration basically said that it was revoking the green card under a couple different laws, one of which is a law that it's from like the McCarthy era, from like the 50s, basically saying that someone's the Secretary of State, who in this case is Marco Rubio, if he has reasonable ground to believe that someone's presence or activities in the U.S. can lead to serious adverse foreign policy consequences, the Secretary of State, like himself, can sign off and revoke their green card or visa. But fascinatingly, Donald Trump's own sister, who was a federal judge, appointed by to various positions by presidents including Reagan and Clinton, had written about this law, and that is basically like so overly broad that it doesn't tell people what is and isn't like worthy of being deported. So there's no way for green card holders to like know what will and won't get them deported, and that this law should be stricken down, but it has not been. And so why is all of this important to science? Because this is a science podcast. This is not a political podcast. But why is this important to science? So aside from the obvious First Amendment issues that should be worrying to all of us because he seemingly is being deported because he protested, apparently, foreign-born people make up a really decent proportion of grad students in this country, as well as many faculty members in science departments.
Mm-hmm.
If this person can be arrested for being a spokesperson, so not even really being like somebody punching cops or whatever, who has not been charged with a crime, can get deported. If say you're a climate scientist or a cancer researcher who's just protesting your funding being taken away, who's to say that you're not going to get deported just for saying, hey, I need this funding to do my work. I'm going to go march and do nothing illegal, do nothing that really harms anybody, but you get kicked out of the country just for expressing your First Amendment rights, which do apply to people anyone who's here in the U.S., regardless of if you're a citizen or not. So all of that is going to basically make it so no one from other countries wants to come here for education or to teach, which means they're going to take their expertise elsewhere and ultimately make it so science in the U.S. overall suffers. Unfortunate.
Yes.
To say the least. So, just wanted to point that out, that this, has a really chilling effect on free speech for, anyone who is, of any kind of non-citizen, or even to a point, who knows? The Trump administration has already been defying court orders this past weekend as well. Who's to say they won't try shipping off citizens to Canada or Guantanamo? Who knows? Maybe that's just me being a little conspiracy-y, but anyway. I just thought that was important to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I am very interested to see how this plays out in court. Courts are, I am interested to find out what the Trump administration's rationale is if they have information we don't, which seems unlikely, but I'd allow for the possibility for. Otherwise, boy, this is one of those things that people look at and, one of the reasons people were scared, and not just like disappointed that their side lost, but one of the reasons why people were legitimately like, man, this feels like a different situation.
Yeah.
Was things like this. So I'm very curious to see the court process play out, to see if there's more information that we don't know about, and then to see
and
if
that
the courts
absolutely
hold.
could be the case. But
I always want to allow for that, but
yeah,
based on what we know now.
Yeah, the spokespeople who've been talking to the media about it have not been encouraging on that front, because you would think if there is an ongoing investigation, they would say something to the effect of, we don't comment on ongoing investigations.
Or he wouldn't be arrested yet.
Right. But basically, one of the spokespeople for, I think it was Homeland Security, basically said, well, if he had checked the box for being a terrorist on his green card application, we probably wouldn't have admitted him. So they're just saying they consider him a terrorist because he doesn't like what the Israeli government is doing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of all the messaging that they've been putting out is, for example, the official White House account tweeted a picture of him, on the day or maybe the day after, because he was arrested at like 2 a.m. But that said, "Shalom, Mahmoud." I'm like, that's pretty on the nose. That like you're doing this just because of Israel.
Yeah.
So anyway, like I said, this is not a politics podcast. Welcome back to all of our listeners who didn't want to be a little more sad today. Fia, tell us about some grass.
Yeah. So Gavin and Mike, what the heck is seagrass?
I'll let Mike go.
Grass that grows underwater. Like that's an obvious one. Slam dunk. No further questions necessary. It's been nice knowing you guys. End of the episode.
Oh, all right. I guess we're done. Bye, guys.
Yep, see you later. Yeah, I would say I don't think it's necessarily grass per se.
Yeah.
But some
Why not?
some
It's in the
kind
name.
of
It's in the name.
yeah, but common names are often dumb and bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, names like Gavin.
Yeah. So some kind of flowering plant that lives in not just water, but like marine environments.
Cool. Yeah. So I think that combination-wise, we can say that you guys did great.
Yay.
Yeah. So seagrasses are true plants, which means that they have roots, stems, and flowers, and they're kind of just like the plants in your backyard.
Right. So it's not like kelp,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah, it's unlike seaweed. Seagrass does not equal seaweed. Totally different things. Seaweed is an algae, actually. And, yeah, it's very actually offensive to seagrass to compare it to seaweed. But yes.
We've offended untold amounts of
so much seagrass. So much seagrass. Yeah, so algae, like the difference between I'm sure, like, when you think of algae, you're probably thinking of, like, that slimy stuff or, like, the way the water looks just kind of, like, green with algae. But in this sort of sense, I'm talking about, like, the kelp or macroalgae, which are, they look like plants, but they, instead of, like, a root system, they have a holdfast, which is basically just, like, a little anchor that they just kind of, like, attach to like the bottom floor. And this is different than seagrass because seagrass have underground root systems that span sometimes miles long.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so another difference too is that algae will transport nutrients through their body by diffusion, which is a little more like it's like less advanced as opposed to plants like seagrass that have like an internal transport system. So how many species of seagrass do you think there are?
Oh, man.
I could be off by orders of magnitude on
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah. Especially with plants.
It's not that much.
You know what? Hold on. I'm going the opposite direction. Okay? Trick question. There's one type of seagrass.
Well, they're all the same.
We've talked about, I think, 3 in various seagrass corners.
Yeah.
So I
it's all been a ruse.
Yes, it's all one species that's different kinds of pasta.
Yes.
So I'm gonna say probably like 40.
Okay. There are actually...
My first answer is going to be about 10,000.
I'm sure that's
right,
much lower.
Right. So I was thinking it's not that much comparatively to like inverts, but there are 72...
That is such a high bar to clear.
Right. 72 species within 12 genera of seagrass.
Okay.
Found all over the world except for in the poles because nothing grows in the poles. They grow in shallow coastal waters and form dense meadows. And so I would like to do a visual exercise with you guys and have you close your eyes. I would like you to imagine floating over a vast underwater meadow with long green grass swaying back and forth with the ocean currents. Sunlight is shining through the water. The fish are darting through the blades of the seagrass, and sea turtles and manatees are grazing on the grass like cows in a pasture.
Like cows in a pasture?
Yes. This is a seagrass meadow, also called a seagrass bed. In my opinion, seagrass beds are absolutely stunning to see underwater, and they're like an underwater prairie. It can stretch for miles and is full of life. One thing to note.
Can confirm.
Yes.
How do the animals down there tolerate humans? Like if we were to go snorkel down there and say hi.
It depends on the animal. There's some that are more skittish than others. Usually, like the bigger fish will tend to skirt on out of there really quick, but some of the smaller fish, like pinfish or I don't know, like juvenile fish, they tend to just stay around and they'll keep their distance, but they still hang around because they know they have places to hide in, like the small cracks through the forest of grass.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
yeah, so the reason why you're able to see these vast meadows of seagrass is because they need sunlight to undergo photosynthesis, so they can really only grow in clear, shallow waters. They're kind of similar to coral in this aspect. And so, next question for you guys. Any guesses as to which country has the largest seagrass ecosystem adjacent to it in the world?
Which country has the largest seagrass system adjacent to it?
Like on their coast, yeah.
So you're gonna want a country that's got a lot of coastline.
Yep.
So your obvious pick, so Russia, but that's so far north that that might not be a good pick. You got Australia, which I think is going to be my answer. The United States has quite a bit of coastline. Brazil has quite a bit of coastline. Chile has quite a bit of coastline. I'm going with Australia.
Yeah, my first thought was Australia, and then my second thought was Indonesia, because Indonesia is just like a huge series of islands that just covers a lot of area in shallow, warm water. Yeah, the west coast of the Americas though is weird though, Mike, with places like Chile.
Yeah.
Because it gets very deep very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the east coast of the Americas has a lot more flat before it gets deep. The nice coastal shelf.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm also gonna say Australia, but Indonesia I think might get there too.
Okay, if it's neither of those, they get to pick a second one, though. Go ahead, Fia.
Well, I'm
Is
going
one
to
of us
call
right?
it as Mike was right because he said Australia first. So
Okay.
That's fair.
it is Australia. Shark Bay, Australia holds the largest seagrass ecosystem. It, I believe, is 77 square miles, which
Wow.
is equivalent to just under 600,000 football fields. That's a lot of football fields.
Americans will measure anything except the metric system.
That is correct.
Yeah. Well,
How many Volkswagen Beetles is that?
I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that, Matt.
Because you're a coward.
You're right. All right. So now I want to talk about a little bit of the evolutionary origins of seagrass, just for Gavin and also the rest of you that are here to talk about paleontology. So yeah, seagrasses, they evolved from land plants and made their way back into the ocean. So Gavin, correct me if I'm wrong, but plants started in the ocean and then went to land.
Depends how you define plant.
Okay.
But broadly, yes.
Yeah.
Whether basically it's like, does green algae count as plant?
No.
Well, it depends who you ask.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
So yeah, it depends.
Okay.
But broadly speaking, yes.
Well, regardless, their ancestors were likely terrestrial flowering plants that gradually adapted to saltwater environments. The oldest seagrass fossils date back to the Cretaceous period. There's fossil evidence that suggests early seagrasses coexisted with ancient marine reptiles like the plesiosaurs and the mosasaurs. And fun fact, seagrasses are one of the only few flowering plants to colonize the ocean, making them a rare evolutionary success story.
How does a flowering plant, like, how does that work in the ocean?
Yeah, so you think of...
I will say some brief spoilers for next week here.
Oh, yeah.
So flowering plant doesn't necessarily mean it grows something that like the average person would recognize is a flower.
True. It just means they make
So,
pollen,
like,
right?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
We'll learn more about it
Right.
next episode.
Yeah.
But basically, it's like all the grasses, like wheat. You know, if you just watch wheat grow in a field, you're not going to see something that looks like a daisy or a sunflower or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Well, guys, tune into our next episode in a few weeks to learn more about that. But essentially, Mike, in a broad answer, is that you think of the flowers underwater as flowers with pollen, and then
Right.
the currents of the ocean are like the wind, and they're essentially mixing.
Fascinating.
They're mixing the pollen and fertilizing the seagrasses like that.
And just the currents of the ocean or of the water or whatever the body of water is. It's not all ocean. That's fine.
Right. Right.
But when you're like just the mixing of that
Yes.
is able to help spread it. That's incredible.
Yes.
This planet's awesome.
I would guess there's also some sort of like invertebrate or something that does some localized pollinating, but I don't know too much about that. I know like the main way is like just through the ocean currents.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that also makes sense because like wind-blown pollen is like, you know, it's a lot easier for water to move pollen around than it is for wind.
Mm-hmm.
And wind is also really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly.
I feel like it just wouldn't be necessary.
Right. Yeah, and in fact, I feel like I think for some species, the main way that they reproduce is actually asexually. So seagrasses, they can do it both ways. They can, have sexual reproduction with the flowering plants, but they also can, you would see in mint in your garden, can just like grow new shoots right next to each other over and over again.
Right. So not like self-fertilization.
No.
But more like budding.
Exactly. Yeah. And
it's what the plant folks call vegetative growth.
Yes. So yeah, just to finalize this paleontology of seagrass, people have found fossilized rhizomes of seagrass, which are basically the underground portion of the stems of seagrass, and also fossilized pollen and leaf imprints, which those have been found in places like the Mediterranean, Florida, and Southeast Asia.
Neat.
Yeah. Last fun fact is that some well-preserved seagrass fossils have been found in limestone formations, indicating that they thrive in shallow, warm seas, which they still do that today. Yeah. All right. Mm-hmm. So now we can get into the science of seagrass. How do seagrass work? So like I talked about before, just like plants, they absorb sunlight and convert it into energy through photosynthesis. Unlike most other underwater plants, they have roots that anchor and span deeply into the sediment or sand. They're one of the few flowering plants in the ocean, and so they'll also produce flowers and seed pods as well. And then the more likely way of reproduction for some species, they'll spread through underground roots called rhizomes, and that can help stabilize the ocean floor because you're just adding more density in like a localized area.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's almost like, how trees along a stream stabilize it. Just the roots like help.
Yes, exactly.
Keep the soil together.
Yes, exactly. And So one last term I want to talk about is a seagrass shoot. What is a seagrass shoot? It's just the term that people use for an individual seagrass plant. It's just a bundle of leaves packaged up into a single unit that is a seagrass. And so people will call one seagrass a seagrass shoot, and the shoot is made up of a lot of leaves or blades, like blades of grass. And so that is mostly how seagrass work. Now I want to talk about the superpower of seagrass and why it is unique. Unlike seaweed or algae, which just drifts in the water or is anchored semi-permanently, seagrasses are rooted into the ocean floor. They create these entire meadows, just like forests, that provide homes for thousands of marine species. And so you're looking at shrimp, crab, fish, amphipods, worms, anything you can think of in the ocean. It's probably at some point in its life related to seagrass, because it's such a great habitat. And another cool thing about seagrass is that they can live for thousands of years. Some seagrass meadows are actually over 5,000 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, there's actually, I looked this up and very surprising. There's one single patch of seagrass in the Mediterranean that's estimated to be at least 80,000 years old, which to my knowledge
Bananas.
is like,
That's old.
I think it's might be the oldest living thing on Earth.
Yeah, sometimes you hear some stuff about like some giant fungus
Right. Yeah.
that live in some areas, but it's like I think those might top out in like the 10,000 maybe,
Right.
but like 80, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So they can get old and live forever. But in addition to that, they can also absorb nutrients from the water. They're just like the plants in your garden. They like fertilizer, which is nitrogen and phosphorus. And so those nutrients they can take up from the water column and store those as biomass. And then they also can help prevent erosion because they hold on to all the sediment in the sand, and they get all the roots, just like Gavin was talking about, like a tree by the river. They're really just packing in all that dirt into one place. And so now that we know what seagrass is and that you know why they're important, let's talk about the things that seagrass can do to help, basically to act as a superhero. So, seagrasses can absorb and store carbon dioxide, actually even more efficiently than rainforests. I think someone did the math and it's like up to 35 times faster than rainforests.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. This carbon is stored in the sediment for thousands of years, and can help reduce greenhouse gases. And comparatively to like how much seagrass there is, they do a heck of a good job of storing carbon. So seagrass meadows only cover about 0.2% of the ocean's floor, but they store 10% of the ocean's carbon.
And carbon in the ocean, correct me if I'm wrong, is like, I mean, I'm trying to think of the right way to say it, but like, we need to be storing carbon in the ocean. Like, that
Correct.
is one of the ways
Absolutely.
that like,
Yeah.
Yes.
that this works, or it's supposed to work
Right.
at least.
Yes, because the way like emissions actually like get into the atmosphere, a lot of it ends up being absorbed into the ocean because of, I want to say diffusion. I'm not entirely,
Pretty much,
yeah,
yeah.
basically diffusion. But yeah, we definitely need to be storing carbon in the ocean, and I think that seagrass can do an amazing job. On top of that, seagrass also help produce oxygen, and yeah, that oxygen is always good for us humans and anything else that relies on oxygen to breathe. And then next, we'll talk about seagrass as a nursery for marine life. We touched on this a bit, but all of the blades of long and short and thick and tiny, the different shapes and sizes of seagrass in a meadow can create this perfect safe haven for smaller fish like baby fish, also shrimp, crabs, all that kind of stuff. It's basically just like hiding in a jungle. I would much rather hide in a jungle than a desert. And
Yeah.
I wonder what most people would say to that question, actually. Jungle versus desert, where would you rather hide? I don't know.
I mean, from a very large predator, dense jungle for me. But anyways, larger species like manatees, sea turtles, and sharks also rely on seagrasses for food. The manatees and sea turtles eat the seagrass directly. They love munching on that stuff. And then the sharks, that's a big hunting ground for them, as well as like other larger predators like snook, speckled trout, redfish, the sort of commercially and recreationally valuable fishes.
Mm-hmm.
They can also provide shelter from strong currents, so you can hunker down into these seagrasses when there's a big storm coming if you're small. And so, yeah, seagrasses for me, I'm a habitat ecologist, so my number one thought is always, all right, what is this habitat going to do for organisms? And for seagrasses, they host a lot of yummy invert food for fish and actual food for some bigger animals. And one cool anecdote I saw in the ocean recently is that sometimes on seagrass, there's these things called epiphytes, which will grow on the seagrass blades. And it's kind of like moss growing on a tree. And I have seen these pinfish, which are just small bait fish, but I want to say last episode I talked about them with their kind of comb-like teeth. I've seen them go up to the blades and scrape off the epiphytes from the seagrass. And they don't ever bite the seagrass. It's literally just like they're scraping it off the blades, which is crazy to think how such a small fish can be like so precise and just only take the epiphytes off and not munch into the seagrass. Yeah. So what else can seagrass do for us? You can think of seagrasses as ocean's Brita filter, cleaning the water and
Jesus.
keeping everything fresh.
What a tagline.
It's just a Brita filter, you know? So the seagrass it physically can trap sediment and pollutants, making the water clearer and more favorable to people that like clear water, like me and a lot of other people. They can also help prevent algal blooms by absorbing excess nutrients. So like I said before, just like fertilizer in your garden, the seagrass need nitrogen and phosphorus to grow. And a lot of our runoff water that eventually goes into the ocean, quote, Finding Nemo, all drains lead to the ocean, they are able to soak up a bunch of the excess nutrients that humans are kind of bringing down into the ocean coastlines. And then finally, seagrass is really important for the seafood industry. So, do y'all like seafood?
It depends. I like fish.
You like fish?
Honestly, no.
No, not
See,
even
like, I'm
a
not a lobster
single
guy.
fish?
I'm not a clams guy. I'm not an
No.
oysters guy. But I like fish.
Yeah, no. There's basically nothing that lives in the water that I like to
What
eat.
about shrimp? You like some shrimp cocktail?
No,
Really?
no.
Calamari?
Okay.
I know. I'm a weirdo.
Sushi?
I know it.
Sushi?
No.
Oh my gosh, Gavin.
Wild. Whack.
Well,
Sorry. I know that I am for sure in the minority in that though. So.
Fee, what about you? You like your seafood?
I love seafood. I love all of the shellfish. Well, that's a lie. I love shellfish that aren't bivalves because clams are gross. But yeah.
What a way to say I don't like clams, that I like all shellfish except for bivalves. I don't even know what that means.
Like, I don't like oysters or clams or any.
But the fact that we consider bivalves and also crustaceans to both be shellfish is silly.
Yeah, it is. I like the I like the shrimp and the crabs and that type of seafood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, like the seagrasses, their habitat, and they're also an all-you-can-eat buffet for some of these larger fish, and they directly support these fisheries and seafood industries. They can also boost tourism through snorkeling, diving, and ecotourism. They also protect coastal communities by reducing wave impact during storms. So, just like other things like mangroves or oyster reefs, they are a physical barrier that kind of dampens the wave energy when it's hitting the coastline. And so that's pretty much what we got. And now we can move into the threats. So, despite all of these amazing things that seagrass do, they're disappearing pretty fast. Again, I'll bring up the football field. We lose about a football field of seagrass every 30 minutes, which is a lot faster than I thought, and I'm a little stressed now. But yeah, there's a couple big threats that I want to mention here that are really driving this seagrass loss. And the first of that is propeller scarring. You can also think of this as like open wounds in the ocean. So when a boat travels through shallow waters and they have an outboard motor, their propeller is cutting straight into the seagrass beds and basically making a giant scar through some of these meadows. And these scars can take decades to heal, or they may never even recover. I've heard about some research saying that depending on like currents and tides, some scars that are like cut north to south may never grow back, but ones that are cut like east to west may be more quickly to heal, which is blows my mind that is a thing. But I guess
right,
and this is probably dependent also on where the coastline is as well.
Right. Also, in the southern hemisphere, is it the other way?
I don't know.
Like how the toilets spin backwards.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure
that was a bad joke.
It's probably dependent on a lot of things, but the main point is that these scars are very finicky, and some may never even grow back. And so You can think of this as kind of like imagining a bulldozer tearing through a forest and just leaving a giant strip behind of it. And that's like what a single propeller scar can do to a seagrass meadow. And so my lab is directly researching the seagrass scars in the Gulf Coast of Florida and looking at the scarring intensity and frequency, but they've also done a lot of things to incorporate the communities that depend on these seagrass meadows. So they're doing a lot of things like putting up posters at boat launches, and I see them all over the place, and it's like scars hurt. And every time I see it, I just feel like I need to put on my superhero cape and be like, scars hurt. And I don't know, I just like it. But we also put up some buoys like warning shallow seagrass nearby. We my lab has also done some boater trainings to educate people on seagrass scarring. And now a couple of people in my lab are getting into aerial drone mapping these seagrass meadows and looking at the scars and trying to pinpoint exactly where the most scarring is happening and kind of finding some sort of solution to the seagrass scarring problem in that area. All right, next big thing that is hurting the seagrass is coastal development and pollution. Like I said before, runoff from fertilizers, sewage, and chemicals can cause algal blooms, and those algal blooms they turn the water green and make the water clarity really low, and so that blocks the sunlight, and it can kill off the seagrass because the algae will float on top and basically suffocate them out. Also, along with coastal development, dredging and construction can destroy the seagrass meadows as well. The pollution, there's some pollution that can weaken seagrass, making it more vulnerable to disease. And so, something I want to relay to you guys is that what you put on your lawn or down your drain, it doesn't just disappear, and it can end up affecting seagrass miles and miles away, even if you don't live near the coast at all. Last but not least, we have climate change, rising waters, and rising risks.
You knew we were getting there at some point.
Yep, here we are. Warmer ocean temperatures, they're going to stress out the seagrass. It's going to cause die-offs. We've already seen that happen. Along with the warming ocean temperatures, you've got the algal blooms that will pop off too and kill off the seagrass. And then you have sea level rise, which will then in turn limit the sunlight that the seagrass needs to grow. So if there's seagrass meadows that were once in shallow livable waters, but right at the threshold of where like sun can really get there, with sea level rise, those increases might end up knocking those meadows out. And again, with climate change, we are likely to see an increase in frequency and intensities of weather events like storms and hurricanes. And as much as established seagrass meadows are strong and can withstand some impact, there's only so much they can handle. And so once you get up to like higher category hurricanes, like they're just going to get wiped out. Personally, where I work, we did some monitoring of seagrass all throughout the Gulf Coast of Florida last year in the springtime, and then we had 2 major hurricanes hit in the fall, and we just went back there last week to do the monitoring at the same sites, and there were at least like 2 to 3 of them that were completely wiped out with no seagrass anymore. So it's happening in real life. But let's talk about how you can help.
Yay!
Good
Yeah,
news.
you want to give us something
I'm not.
to take home here?
Listen, I'm not gonna end it. I'm not gonna end it with a Debbie Downer. We're gonna bring some uplifting.
That's my
roots.
job.
Yeah, that's Gavin's job. So there's a few things that you can do to help save seagrass, no matter where you live. And the first one, this is probably for more coastal people: be a responsible boater. Follow no motor zones and seagrass zones. Avoid shallow seagrass beds when you're boating. Follow channel markers to prevent propeller scarring, and use seagrass-friendly anchors or drop anchors in sandy areas instead of the seagrass meadows. One thing that is an absolute game changer to the coast down in Florida are power poles, and so they're just essentially like a large what do I want to call it? A large poking stick that is attached to the boat, and when you press a button, it goes down into the water, and it just pokes down into the sediment, and it just anchors you there without harming the seagrass and ripping out like chunks of it. So next time you're out on the water, think of seagrass meadows as a fragile coral reef. Would you drive a boat straight through a coral reef? Probably not.
Bad idea.
Bad idea.
Unfortunately, some people do.
Well, we're against that. Another thing that you guys can do is reduce pollution and runoff. Try to limit the use of fertilizers and pesticides, or try to use some more natural fertilizers or composting, because those things will all wash into the waterways, and those waterways will all end up dumping into coastal ecosystems, and that will harm the seagrass. So even if you live far away from the ocean, the chemicals you use on your lawn, in your garden, they could eventually make their way into the coastal waters. You can also dispose of waste properly. Don't be dumping anything you're not supposed to down the drain. And then support local conservation groups working to restore seagrass habitats. Then last but not least is get involved in seagrass conservation. You can participate in coastal cleanups and restoration projects, or even just next time you're on vacation and you go to the beach, bring a bag and fill it with trash while you scavenge for shells and other treasures. You can also support organizations that protect marine habitats. And then you can also spread awareness, educate others about the importance of seagrass. One small but powerful way to help that I would like to challenge all of you listeners today to do is to share what you've learned throughout this episode. The more people who know about seagrass, the better chance we have of protecting it. So,
and we want more of it around.
Right, exactly. We know that it's good for us. We know that it's good for the animals, and we should have spread the information far and wide so we have a better chance of protecting it. So that's all I got for the superhero of the seagrass. It fights climate change, shelters marine life, cleans our waters, and protects our coast. Any other thoughts, y'all?
No, that's really cool, because everyone, people who care about climate change, in passing, where it's something that they think is important, but they're not in the sciences,
right.
The first thing that comes to mind is the Amazon. Everyone talks so much about the Amazon. It's the Amazon's cool, the Amazon's important, but there's a lot of other stuff that we're killing as well.
There's also an underwater Amazon that is a secret. and nobody knows
what?
about.
What, you're just dropping this at the end of the episode?
No, Mike, it's a
Yes.
metaphor.
Oh.
The seagrass are the Amazon.
Oh.
It's called Atlantis, Mike.
I thought, like, I'll tell you what, I thought it was cool as all hell, is what I thought.
It's the seagrass in Shark Bay, Australia.
And with all of that seagrass, it has been episode 155 of I Wish You Were Dead, the podcast about things that used to be alive. My name is Mike. That was mostly Fia. Gavin was there as well. We'll be back in 2 weeks with our next episode. But until then, take care, everybody.
Hello, this is post St. Patrick's Day night out Gavin. And yeah, so I didn't really know what I was going out to, but apparently it was a pub sing, which is a pretty, I guess, well-known thing, but not to me, apparently, despite my family being Irish, where people just go out to a pub on St. Patrick's Day and sing a bunch of Irish, like, sea shanties or classic Irish songs. They even handed out, like, a lyric sheet and everything. And here's to you, Mike. I had 4 drinks, 3 of which were Guinness, because, naturally. So yes, you got me. I had more adult beverages than I said I was going to. Congratulations. Thank you all to whoever made it this far in the show. We appreciate you so much. And we'll see you in a couple weeks. Until then, take care. This episode of I Wish You Were Dead was written by Fenella Campanino and hosted by Gavin Davidson, Mike Bryson, and Fenella Campanino. It was sound edited and edited for YouTube by Gavin Davidson. Special thanks to former guests of the pod and to listeners like you.